sessions and stuff. So it's, you know, it's just me now. You're safe. You're good. There's another camera over there, but it's JK. All right. So my name is Diana Hoffman, and I'm teaching this class because I'm nailing the whole parenting thing. Like, I'm such a good parent. Not true at all. I don't have any biological children, but I am a middle school teacher. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. This is my 6th year in Bridgeton. I've also been doing youth ministry for over 15 years at our church. So I've been really heavily involved with junior high, that age group. So I have over 500 kids, and I call them all my babies, and call them that to their face. So they asked me to just share and speak. So the perks of me not being a parent is you're not going to get any judgment from me. You're not going to get any, like, oh, that's not what I did with my kids. Like, no, and, like, so I always say to my students, like, Judgy Wudgy was a bear, and then Judgy Wudgy died alone. So there's not going to be any judgment from me, so feel free to be open and honest when talking about what you have going on or that kind of thing. So with that, I plan to be very candid with you, and I hope you plan to do the same. This is a talk about purity, so it can get kind of awkward and kind of like skin crawling and oh gosh. But it's important. And if we can't talk about it in church, where can we talk about it, or where should we talk about it, or where should we be getting that information from? Google, I don't think, is the best source of how to lead in purity. I think church is the best place to get that. So I'm a 29-year-old virgin. So I think I'm also leading this because I'm living the pure life right now. And I was parented by imperfect parents, but I think I was parented well by imperfect parents. So I'm here to share some of that too, of what growing up in my home was like. So a bit of what it's like being a teacher and working with a lot of junior high age kids, but then also what it was like being a junior high kid and growing up in my family being parented well by imperfect parents, which is what you all are. So it's going to be a good time. So before we start, we just want to go around real fast, and if you just tell me like who you are, so our group kind of knows, maybe the ages of your kids, and if there's any like why you're here or why you chose this session in particular, that'd be great. Whatever you're comfortable to share. So we'll just start over here.
Sure.
Hello, sir.
Jonathan Cummings. I have 5 kids. Oldest is Lily, who's 14, and then 4 boys. Ian, who's 12, Elijah, who's 9, Asher, who's 7, and Mateo, who's 5.
Awesome.
And because, well, the 5 reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Russell Bourne, and I have 2 girls, Sophia and Olivia. They're 12 and 10. And I'm here because they're reaching that age, and I think we did this last year too, but I refresh it. And of course, because you're teaching it, I had to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Shawn Connors. I have 1 daughter who is 13, and I'm the director of a community outreach program dealing with Center City Millville kids.
Oh, wow.
And as we talk about abstinence and we talk about purity, it's a foreign language to most of them.
Yeah.
Jason Wilson here. Have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Boys are our oldest. We have 2 boys.
I have the same thing.
So our oldest is 9,
Okay.
7, 8,
Nah.
6.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it.
9, 7,
That's cool.
6, and 3.
No, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Their birthdays are in 2 weeks. I'm confused. I've aged them already.
Yeah?
So our boys are oldest, and I just noticed, like, my son, my oldest boy, is really into football. He's coming, there's a lot of football sites that have like little advertisements and stuff like that, and just learning to safeguard his heart against what could be destructive, in his life, and just seeing, recognizing generational sin and being open and talking about that, I think, is like key. So we chose this because we're starting to see, different challenges that he might be facing, and even our girls as they're growing up, teaching them the importance of just purity. So that's a big thing that Katie is kind of heading up with the girls and giving them a good sense of self-worth.
Caleb is very aware, so I know he's only 9, but it's like I want to be on top of this because even something as simple as walking by Victoria's Secret already, like, you know, having to talk with him about. So
he's like a head turn, like like.
But yet he loves the Duggars, so our kids have these like ideas, like they watch all the 19 Kids and Counting and stuff, and they're like, my first kiss will be when I get married, and it's really like, whoa, don't pressure yourself. Like,
Very popular.
Like that's not the norm, but to them the Duggars are young high school kids.
I mean, that's it's better than like the Kardashians, like
right.
But I think the world that we're raising kids in is vastly different than the world we grew up in, as far as exposure and like I'll venture to say I'm a few years younger than a lot of you, but like give or take 1 or 2. But it's even vastly different than when I grew up, and with the internets and all that kind of thing. It's just very different. And what's acceptable now was like not acceptable when I was growing up. So it is a big deal, and I'm really excited you guys are here, and I'm grateful that you're here. So I think we're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be good. So I'm gonna start off by saying, penis, vagina, blowjobs are when someone puts a penis in their mouth to make a man feel pleasure. Wet dreams are when a man ejaculates semen in his sleep. No, he can't control that. No, you cannot get pregnant from oral sex, but you can get STDs. STDs do not go away. STDs can be painful, itchy, bloody, gross, lead to mental and other health problems. You don't have to have sex to get an STD. Women can bleed after having sex. Just because the woman has the baby doesn't mean the man is not responsible to care for the baby. His wages can and will be garnished if he refuses to pay child support. Yes, you can get pregnant on your period. Masturbation is when someone touches themselves to get sexual pleasure. I say that to say these are all conversations that I have in small group and in my classroom all the time. These aren't just bad public school kids asking these questions. I've had all of these conversations at church youth group with my students. I've said all of these things, discussed all of these things, and if you're already like, like our child's 9, like why are we? This is life. So my first point, and I gave on your handout, is to not be naive. That I think that's a really big thing that I want to encourage you. Just don't be naive. That this is the world that we live in, and this is kind of what your children are easily exposed. Like you were saying, he goes on a football site. He's just looking up football. Every advertisement on this site, his football pages are geared toward men and whatever. It's not going to be. They don't make kid-friendly football site. Like it's not like that. And kids are curious. Your children will be curious. So even the most innocent, she's got whatever, I'm going to click on it. Their eyes just get exposed. So it doesn't mean that they've started this whole life of pornographic addiction. It just means they're going to be exposed to a lot because they're going to be curious. So I would just encourage you to not be naive, that the world that we live in, the friends that they interact with, the kids that they're around, so maybe they're not initially talking about it, but I remember growing up, a lot of the stuff or the questions that I would have for my parents would be from conversations I had with my friends. Not that they were influencing me, like they were talking about the ladder and all of that, but more just they'd say something, and I'd go, they'd make a joke. My dad's first conversation with my sister about blowjobs was from a joke that she heard on the bus coming back. So she was like, well, I laughed, but I didn't know what I was laughing at. And so my dad had to be like, all right, here's the whole awkward encyclopedia of everything gross, and just we have to talk about it. And so so she just naively, like, I laughed, but I didn't know why it was funny and what was going on. And so to not be naive. So maybe you do homeschool or do a lot of things like very in a very controlled kind of environment. But I would say, which is great, and I would also say that if their exposure to it now might be limited, it's not going to be when they're in college, unless you plan to do home college and home job and home everything else. Like their exposure is going to happen at some point, and it almost seems as though now is a better time than when the stakes are higher, when they're 19, 20, and naive and don't know things. So it's better to prepare our kids now, I think. Yes, what are you thinking?
Are we allowed to ask questions now?
Oh, absolutely. Sure, why not?
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
First of all, you talked about your your dad
Uh-huh.
speaking to your sister.
Yes.
So I was wondering, you as her sister and you
Right.
as two girls in the family,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think or feel about that coming from your dad as opposed to your mom? Do you think it was better, worse, or it didn't matter?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that. I think it didn't matter.
Okay.
Because my family, we have a culture of just communicating. I don't remember when my formal sex talk happened growing up, but I remember my dad talking to me about sex, and I remember my mom talking to me about sex. And I want to say, I feel like my dad kind of led the charge in a lot of ways, and to me, like, it's an uncomfortable conversation no matter who's having it with you. So, like, my mom would get more into, like, how, like, the feelings and, like, woman body stuff that my dad doesn't know because he's a man. But, no, my dad definitely, guns blazing, just went for it. And
yeah, because, I mean, I would say just some of the advice we heard was, like, maybe, and so far it's been, I mean, not that I've shied away from or anything, but,
right.
Of course, they've had the, they're coming of, both had their periods now.
Right.
So they've had that, those talks.
Right.
And leading up to it. But that's mostly come from Dara. So, and I was kind of led that way that, it's more for the girl.
Right.
She may feel more comfortable talking to the woman, but that's why I was getting your opinion.
And I would say with that, and my opinion to a point is, that makes sense. Growing up, my mom would be the one I'd more talk to about, like, what do I do? Like, put a pad on, all that kind of menstrual stuff. But my dad never shied away from it. Our universal, like, way to communicate that kind of stuff with my dad was more, if I just wasn't feeling good because of my period, I would say, Dad, I'm just really crampy. And that would be his automatic, okay.
Right.
Like, he would know, okay, fine. Didn't have to go into conversation about it, but it wasn't like ew, gross, don't talk to me about that. It wasn't like that. He wasn't afraid of it. But like if I was saying I wasn't feeling good, well, now he's going into, do you need to go to the doctor? Are you throwing up? What's going on? Then it becomes this long conversation, whereas I could just say, I'm just feeling crampy. And he would automatically, okay, it'll go away eventually.
Right.
Sorry, you're a woman. That's
I'm trying to,
Stinks to be you.
Some of my kids, they matter of fact, Olivia she just had her first one 2 weeks ago on vacation.
Oh man,
but
that's a shame.
And it was funny how we were in Tennessee,
right?
And we were going to this. I'll try to make this short, but we were going to this attractions where you get put inside these big plastic balls and you roll down a mountain.
Yes.
And so we had to go inside, and they put water inside.
Oh.
So she went inside to get changed, and she came out, and she was like, she wasn't changed. She was like, called my wife in there and told her, and she didn't say anything to me yet about it. So, but the first ride down, we went together, me and her together, and then we get down to the bottom, and she says, "Oh, by the way, I had my period." I'm like, great for thank you for telling me that.
That ride didn't cause that for me.
Yeah. Well, she had it.
No, right? No, I'm kidding.
Anyway,
I know how periods work.
So, my second, I'm sorry to
You're totally
monopolize
fine. No.
but second question was, talking about this naive stuff, how far do you think, should we broach every subject, do you think before it comes up, or as it, I mean, there's obviously give and take there, because they had the sex talk, but these things about blowjobs, I don't think they talked about that.
And I'm not saying now's the time to expose your kids to every, no. I'm, like, a lot of times these conversations, I was going to say too, like, I didn't grow up talking about sex a lot in my house. That wasn't like a normal, okay, now we're going to talk about sex again. Like, it was not something we really talked about very often. But we talked a lot as a family. And so we had dinner every night together as a family and just talked. So I feel like a lot of times if you're just talking, those sex talks either aren't really going to happen, or it's one sentence in a conversation and you're done with it. Or we'd also watch TV a lot together, or movies. So that would kind of open up some windows. So a lot of times I'd be watching a movie and my dad's sitting right next to me on the couch. It's one of those like, I would either fast forward, oh my gosh, this is a longer scene than we anticipated, Or something would happen, and my dad would just kind of look at me like, you know what that is? And I'd be like, and he'd be like, that's this, and that's why it happened. And I'm like, okay, moving on. Like, it wasn't, so no, I'm not saying you need to, okay, let me explain to you every weird thing. Right. No, it's more as it came up.
Okay.
As it came up, and I think a really key thing with that, though, is to just be talking with your children, because if you're not talking with them, then it does have to become a formal conversation, because then it is like that awkward. But if you're just so a lot of my sex talks growing up, I don't even remember, because it's while we're watching Seinfeld on the couch and they're talking about yada yada yada, and I'm like, yada yada yada. We're playing rummy, and my dad's like, oh, it means, and I'm like, oh, okay, okay. Right. So like that kind of thing.
To me it gets kind of tricky because I want them to come to us for their information, so it's true.
Right.
You know, because they're. I assume. I mean, I don't know. Our kids are kind of you went to public school, right? I assume.
No, I went to Christian school.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But even so, I don't. I mean, there's. Here's my naive part. So they may have less exposure, maybe than in a public school. So, but still.
They will have less or different exposure, but they're around peers.
Right.
And so, like, everything I just rattled off, yes, I've discussed in front of a classroom of 20, but yes, I've discussed every single one of those in a small group of 3.
Yeah.
So it's in junior high with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Right. So it happens.
Yeah.
It's out there.
Right.
Or, like you were saying, with going on websites. So they're going to see things. Things are just going to kind of, whoop. A lot of the stuff they'll get exposed to, they're probably going to stumble upon.
Right.
But kids are curious, and like that's a good thing that kids are curious. We just have to help them maneuver and steer through their curiosity, so it doesn't become like I like that.
Right. So like when they do hear this, I want them to come back to us and ask the question like, oh, this is what they told me, but and that might be hard for them and all that. But,
absolutely.
That's where you talk
about
just talking.
That's why I was just talking.
Yes.
Just talking. Yeah. Like the more you're talking, the easier it is to just bring up those things. So I never really had a lot of formal conversations growing up. They would just be kind of these in passing, like, ooh, that was awkward, but then moving on, that we're just going to keep going. So do not be naive. Curiosity is easily satisfied in this digital, all that kind of stuff, like technological, easily satisfied. They can just Google something. You can Google anything, and it just pops right up. So I wanted to bring my phone in, too, just to show real quick, just in case you're not super. So I can pull up my phone. And I can just go on YouTube. So I'm going to YouTube like a 13-year-old. So I'm on YouTube. And, my friend, let me see. So I'm just going to look up sex because I heard about that. Let me just look it up. I'm just going to hit search, type in sex, look it up. And there's all videos. Boom. I can watch homemade porn because that all is on YouTube, not a problem. Like sex, I can look it up. Boom. Sex with a clown. There's Kings of Sex, sex in a car, just tons. And all I typed in was sex. Or I could just be maybe I'm a little more innocent. I'll be kissing. I want to make sure I'm good at it when it happens. Like, boom, like so many raunchy, dirty, like that easy. So kids are curious. And so that came from, I heard about this, I'm going to look it up, and it just turned into now I'm looking at all this porn. Like it's not, they don't pull up these informational, this is what sex is. No, it's horrible, like just, oh gosh, stuff you wouldn't want. And it was that easy. That took me 30 seconds to get porn on my phone. So, I'll clear the search history later. Or Facebook, I can pull that up right away. And, so I'm hoping that we kind of are limiting what our kids are exposed. But it's easy. Or I can go on Google right now, and I can type in anything I know, and boom, thousands of things. So do not be naive, and your kids are curious. Your kids aren't bad, they're curious. But bad things can come out of curiosity. So the verse that I was thinking with this is Ephesians 6:12. So it's, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So this idea of, yes, we're talking about purity, but there's more at stake here. This is Satan trying to win your kids. So that's why I refer to this as a fight. Like, we're fighting. This is a war. And this is a big deal. So this is more than just I don't want my boys to always be looking at boobs. Like, this is more than that. I want them to win. I want Jesus to be on the throne of their heart and not them getting caught up in these distractions. Whenever I talk with my students about sex, I talk about this idea of, like, if their heart was like a piece of paper, and the more they engage with sexual, because a lot of my students are more sexually active than I am, and they're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I share with them, like, if your heart was like a piece of paper, every time you're engaging in real intimate stuff with other people, it's like you're ripping a piece of it off and giving it to them. And so what happens when you have the one come into your life, you're not going to have much to give them, and you're going to have a lot of ripped up, jagged little shards of paper. And you're not going to be able to say, hey, like, I'm not as damaged. I don't have all this ripped off stuff. So that's kind of how I discuss it with them. So we're at war, not just against flesh and blood, but against authorities, against the cosmic powers. There's cosmic powers wanting your kids to not pursue purity and not want to follow God's design for their life. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So don't be naive. Also, just in case you ever hear something, Urban Dictionary, do you guys ever know? Go on that. UrbanDictionary.com. If you ever hear anything just in your own social life, it gives you like a million definitions for every slang term, every word ever invented, and it's like, that's what that means. So, like, sometimes at school I have to watch my history activity off my work computer because I'm like, I needed to know what that meant, and some kid said this, and it's a lot of things. So, just in case, that's a resource.
I wasn't sure if at some point you would talk about this, but we have like a really good protective, blocking, what do you call it? Filter on our computer. But like for cell phones and stuff like that, is there a filter that's effective on cell phones?
There are, but I don't know a specific, yet. The reason I'm pausing is because, like, my school laptops the students use have every filter known to man, but a kid can easily type in a proxy, which is a website that overrides all of that. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of one of those, like, I always go, yes, like, there are, but I always err on the side of kids are always going to be smarter than me as far as how to get over.
Accidental, like,
the accidental stuff.
I feel like our phones don't have anything on them right now. Mm-hmm. So, like, our son could just accidentally on a football site, because... Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I can check on that and get back to you. But yeah, accidental stuff, it's tricky. I'm not sure if there's a ton on phones that you can do, because that is tricky. But yeah, it's a challenge. So we're fighting against everything. Like, everything's kind of coming against your kids. But we have God on our side. So we've got the winner already on our side, so that's kind of a good thing. So my next point is fight for your child. And this is where I just want to really encourage you, like, to fight, like, to dig in your heels and know this isn't going to be happening to my child. This isn't going to be what's ruling our family. I'm not going to be governed by fear in this. Like, I'm going to fight. My parents always growing up told me that they didn't need friends. So I wasn't their friend. They said a lot, like, and they would say to me, my dad, this is always, I hated it when my dad would say this. He would go, I am not your friend, I am your father. And that was when I was sitting on the corner of the countertop. That was always where we had our biggest throwdowns. So I was just sitting there, and he would always say that to me, and my mom would say, I am not an obstacle. Those were the two biggest things my parents would say to me, because I was very strong-willed growing up, and very much... I'm going to figure this out for myself, and I'm perfect, and I make all the great decisions, and I know everything, and very much. So my dad would always go, I'm not your friend, I'm your father. And that would always scare the crap out of me when he would say that. I knew, like, it was about to throw down when I would hear that. So I'm going to make some more suggestions, and I would just encourage you, like, to evaluate some of your responses to things I might say. So if you might have but they'd be mad at me if I did that. Or she'll think differently when she has kids. I would encourage you to just kind of evaluate where those responses are coming from, just as we continue on. Because a lot of times when I'm resistant to an idea, or I think, it's because of fear, or it's because of something that I'm believing and following.
because I think with this being a war, that there has to be, sometimes we have to take extreme measures to fight, and we have to do things that aren't going to be popular in our house. But you guys are parents, you're not their friends, you're not. And my dad would say too, like, if we end up being friends, that'd be great, but I'm your father first, and I'm the only one you ever have. So, like, that's my role. And my mom would follow along. He would, she would say the same kind of thing. I'm your mom. Like, it'd be great if we could be friends. And now I would say, as a 29-year-old, like, my parents and I are close. Like, we are very close. I was afraid of my dad a lot growing up in middle school, high school, like, very intimidated by my dad. My mom, yes, too, because I knew if I gave my mom grief, my dad was coming after. So it was like they were a really solid team. But I remember in my teen years being pretty, like, I still loved them, and we still did a lot of fun together, and we talked all the time, but there was a definite intimidation factor. But now I feel like I'm very close with my parents. Like, for my birthday, they took me out for dinner. It was just me and my parents hanging out for dinner, and it was great. It was so fun, just drinking a glass of wine with my mom and dad, having a great birthday dinner. So, let's see. My dad would oftentimes, too, say that he was willing to be the bad guy. So he would say, and my mom, too, she's like, we're fine with that. Like, if you can be as mad at us as you want, or as frustrated with us as you want, and we're okay, like, it's all right. We'll be the bad guy, because your childhood is more important. And I almost view, like, middle school years as, like, a time to, like, fight for your child's childhood. Because they're still children. They're still kids. Like, they're still little. Once they hit high school, that becomes more the learning to drive, and then you're starting to prepare them for adulthood. Middle school, they're still kids. So, like, this fight, I feel like, in a big way, is fighting for their childhood and not letting that just go to waste. Because I think our culture is so geared toward being older and more mature, and let's get you doing things that you're not mentally, emotionally, physically ready for, but let's make you think that you are. So if everybody could just go like this and hold this part of your head, that would be great. So go ahead and do this. I do this at the first day of school every year. So can anyone tell me what you're holding? Can anyone tell me what we're holding right now? We're holding our forehead. Yes, good, good. What's inside our forehead?
Brain.
Our brain, yes. So does anyone know what part of your brain we are holding?
Frontal lobe.
Yes, we're holding our prefrontal cortex. So what I tell my middle schoolers is, you're not holding anything. And they all look at me like, what? This part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, that's responsible for all of our impulse control, decision-making, personality expression, and social behavior, our kids don't have yet. So you can take your hands down. But I tell them, I said, okay, guys, this part of your brain, I have it, you don't. And they all kind of look at me. I'm like, no, you don't. Have you ever asked your kids why they did something, and their answer is, I don't know? And then you get mad at them, and that's not an answer. That isn't. Sometimes that is the answer, because they actually don't have the part of their brain that tells them why they did that. Yes, that can be a cop-out, yes. But at the same time, this part of their brain doesn't even develop till they're like 18 to 25 years old. So, and I say that to my students at the start of the school year because I tell them I don't expect perfection from you. I expect growth. So I'm expecting you to do things that this part of your brain isn't even there yet. So I joke around that you guys are brain damaged, and I actually am brain damaged because I was in a car accident. Like, you're more brain damaged than I am. And so this whole idea of that. But this idea of they don't even have the decision-making, impulse control part of their brain yet. So you have this curious kid who has the world at their disposal through the computer, through TV, through the internet, and they don't even have the part of their brain for decision-making. So it's almost like sending someone into war with flip-flops on. It's like, or have you ever tried to move someone into their house wearing clogs? It's like, well, that was unsuccessful. So it's this idea that, so even physiologically, they're not ready. They're not ready for this war. But we as parents are a little more ready, or a little bit more able. So I always thought that was interesting in my child psych class when they brought that up, because they would say, like, as a teacher, you get annoyed with your students when they say they don't know, but sometimes they genuinely don't know why. They can backpedal and think, well, maybe if I analyze the situation and try to, because it's using a different part of their brain, but this isn't there. It's not there. So with that, a lot of times I challenge parents in conferences or whenever I've talked with parents in youth group and things, I question a lot of times why their youth group kids, why their junior high kid owns a smartphone. So I don't know where your kids are with phones and things, but I will make an assertion, there is no reason for them to have a smartphone. There's none. There is no reason. And it's just poison. I feel like that's giving them just poison in their hand. Because on smartphones you have Snapchat, and Snapchat is you can take a picture and send it, and it lasts for 10 seconds, and then it disappears. In their mind it disappears, but you can always pull pictures up. Your friends could take screenshots, the whole thing. There's also apps that you can put on a phone that hide other apps. So you can have a lock code on your phone, and your parent, the real savvy parent, he's like, oh, let me check and see what my kid's doing on their phone, will type in the lock code, and it opens up a whole separate screen. So your kid has a secret lock code for themselves that opens up all of their apps. And so there's anything we have, like I saw you were saying with any protective thing with the internet. I'm like, yeah, kids are always going to be smarter than us if they want to find something. Or they'll have a friend say, oh, you didn't want to get on that website? You weren't allowed or you couldn't? There's nothing bad on it. Use this proxy. And that could even be a friend being helpful because the site they were going on was good, but it was blocked for some reason.
There needs to be like a company that knows more than everybody.
I know.
Here's the law that nobody can cross.
It's exhausting and it's stressful. I don't mean to be like, oh, but it is scary. So I want you to get this sense of we're at war. And this is a big deal. And everything out there is geared toward having your kids be dishonest, geared towards them sneaking around, geared toward all of that being okay and being the cool thing and the okay thing. And especially with middle school and this missing, okay, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Like very much that lemming crowd mentality of, well, my friend said this. And a lot of times it does start out as a good thing or a pure thing or a, hey, I couldn't watch this YouTube video because the block on my website, but it was a good video, so here, use this proxy site. Well, so they saw that good video, but now they know this proxy site, so if ever they get curious and something isn't working, so it can snowball so fast. So I just encourage parents all the time, like, smartphones, and if you want to still be like the cool parent, that's just silly, but if you still want to be the cool parent, Rihanna has a flip phone now. Like most celebrities are switching over to flip phones because they're on their phones too much. And so you can tell your kids, hey, Rihanna has one. Isn't she hip and with it and cool?
I don't even know who that is.
She's a singer. It's fine that you don't. Don't be naive. No. But no, a lot of celebrities now are transitioning to flip phones because they're. So you wouldn't be this evil parent if any of your kids have smartphones and you're like, we're gonna just give you a flip. Because what all your kids need a phone for is to call you, right? That's all they need. I mean, like, and if you want to be a little bit more like, they could like text you. Like, that's all they need it for.
Kindergarten, we sent our son to public school in kindergarten. There were kids in his kindergarten class that had phones. They didn't even know how to write yet.
I could borrow the family cell phone because we had one. I could borrow the family one. It was like that big. Whenever I had an away soccer game, when I was in ninth grade. So cool.
I got a beeper at 16.
Stop it. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean,
make
like
sure you tuck in the shirt so everybody can see it.
So most of my middle schoolers in middle school in my public school all have smartphones, and every fight at my school has been as a result of the phone. We had a huge weave on the floor ripped out because of Snapchat, and every porn problem, every issue that we've had has been from phones. Girls sending videos of themselves to just their boyfriend, but then he sends it to everybody because he's an idiot, because he's a 13-year-old boy, and who isn't when they're 13? Every 13-year-old can be kind of woo-hoo. So it's just one of those. So she started out by just being sexy with her boyfriend at 13. Then her whole 7th grade class has it. So I just always tell parents, like, no. I also encourage parents a lot, too, to keep computers in public spaces at your house. Our computer was in the basement, but my parents could always come down, and the screen was facing the room. it wasn't back to the, where I could be on it privately. And I wasn't even allowed to have a TV in my room, and I encourage parents, like, computers and TVs don't need to be in their room. Like, I read when I went to bed. That was my, like, and I really only was in my room to go to bed. So that also opens up doors for just talking. If you're always in the same spaces, we had the basement and the family room, and that's where we always were. And so I'm very against TVs in the room. I'm very against computers in the room. Anything that isolates or allows your child to not be a part of the world that they're living in. And also just for isolation purposes, I don't like it, but also they have all this at their fingertips now, and it's just, I feel like it's not safe. It's not a safe thing. I remember I was in high school and MySpace was like the thing, and because Facebook at that time, you still needed a college email address to get one, so I wasn't old enough to have one because I didn't have a college email address. But I got a MySpace, and I wasn't allowed. My dad had told me, like, I don't want you doing that, but I had one. I was like, yeah, I was so cool, and I had, like, 9 friends, but I was, like, all about it. I was, like, sneaking around on MySpace, and I think I had it for about 2 weeks. And my dad came down the steps, because I'm on the computer, came down the steps into the basement. He's like, what you doing? I totally did the minimize the screen, pull up Minesweeper or whatever thing I was playing. I don't know. And he was like, what were you doing? Or he just saw a look on my face. Like, I think I did hide it all before he saw it, but I totally had that deer in the headlights, classic face. He was like, what's going on? And he was like, pull up your screen. So I pulled it up, and he was like, we're deleting this now. He's like, no, we're deleting it now. And he made me delete it. He didn't delete it. This was me. He's like, okay, delete it, get out of it. And then I was definitely grounded, definitely in trouble. But he was like, no, you are a child, and this can't be in our home. Like, you have just let all these people in our home that you don't know, that you don't, So it was awful, and I was so humiliated. But I got over it. It was fine, like it. And it was definitely, I didn't have the, I hate you, Dad, but I was definitely mad at him. So I was like, now what am I going to tell my friends? My dad made me delete it. Like, actually, I don't think it ever came up with my friends because they're all up in their business and not paying attention to anybody. So it wasn't a big deal. But he made me delete it. I had to get rid of it. So yes, I snuck around and was being sneaky, and even me. But, so it's a war, and I would just encourage you to fight. And to fight for your kids. When I was youth leader, I had one student in my small group, and it was awful. I had her for 7th, because our youth group here at our church is just 7th and 8th grade. Is 6th grade in it now, or is it just 7th and 8th? 6th grade's in it now? Okay, when I was doing it, it was just 7th and 8th grade was youth group. So for 2 years, I had this girl in my small group, and she hated me. She hated me. And every week, I would be getting driven home. Maybe I was just starting to drive, I forget, bawling my eyes out because it was awful. We would fight. She would tell me how stupid I was. She would make the kids all make fun of me. Everything, just awful. It was awful. I hate this kid and it just never worked. She was just really terrible, and she hated my guts. But I'd get home and I'd be venting to my dad about it and just talking. My dad was a middle school teacher, so I was talking with him. This is going on. And we'd always end the conversation, you'd go, yeah, but did you win? And what that meant in my house was, because my dad always says, I'm going to win with you. Like, you can fight me, but I'm going to win this. So, like, you're going to delete the MySpace. You can be mad, and we can argue, but you're going to delete it. So, we weren't a very competitive, athletic kind of, we did sports stuff, but we weren't. So winning wasn't this ugly term of, like, dominance or anything like that. But it was more just, did you win? And so what he meant by that was, yeah, but did she listen to you? And I would always say, yeah, she did. Because it would be like okay, time to go to the group. She'd be like, oh my God, why are you always telling me to do stuff? Why do I always have to do this? I hate you, you're stupid. I'm like, all right, but we're going. And the whole time she's telling me all this stuff, she's walking to the main group thing. Everything was a fight. Everything was a big deal. But my dad would be like, yeah, but did you win? I'd be like, yes. So 2 years, it was exhausting. And when she graduated in 8th grade, there was no hug from her. There was no I love you, Diana. There was nothing. We were enemies. She hated me. But I won. So it was one of those just exhausting. I started doubting, like, should I even be a middle school teacher? Like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm wanting to. and I can't get this kid to like me, that I'm failing. And every week felt like a failure, and I was feeling so burnt out and so just done, completely burnt out. She's still in high school now and still goes to our youth group, and whenever she sees me, Diana, comes over and gives me a big hug, and the first time she did it, I went, don't touch me. And she kind of looked at me, and I was like, we're not friends like that. And she said, what? And I said, you hated me. I said, it's been a few years, but you hated me. And she goes, I didn't hate you that much. And I was like, you hated me. And so then I hugged her. So I wasn't just like, get away from me. But I give this story as an example. And now every time I see her, she's all about me. And I'm like the coolest person, which is nice and fun, but I care more that I won. And it's like what my parents would say, like, I'm not your friend, I'm your father, and if we can be friends, that's great. So it's kind of one of those, like, I like that she likes me now, but I think she likes me now because I had clear boundaries, and she knew where she stood with me, and she knew, if I do this, this is going to happen. And I was really consistent, and she hated it, but now feels so close to me, and that I think I showed her, like, I love you enough to not let you win. Because if you win, we're not following what we need to do. We're not getting done what we need to accomplish. So I think it's important to get this mentality of I need to fight. And there's going to be times where it's really hard, but there's going to be times, too, where there's reward. And it's not going to be this ugly, like, and I'm not saying, like, wait it out, just keep. But it was 2 years. It was 2 years of fighting with this kid. And it's not like that anymore. So my verse for this was Luke 17:1. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea than he should cause one of these little ones to sin. So what I love about Jesus is he didn't mess around. One of my favorite stories of Jesus is when he tears up the temple. Because the expectation of the temple was that it was a holy place. And they were breaking the expectation. So Jesus didn't walk in and say, okay, I'm going to count to 10, and you guys have to pack up and leave. Or he didn't say, okay, you guys need to go. You need to leave. You need to get out of here. No, he walked in, saw what was going on, and it said he had a whip. So unless one of the disciples carried a whip, I like to think of Jesus like braiding, like being mad, leaving, braiding some stuff together to make a whip, and going back in there and flipping tables and being pretty but in the process. I think I really like that about Jesus. I like that there's this sense of, you're not meeting my expectation. My expectation was for this to be God's place, so I'm going to fight. Because I'm not going to be the one allowing this to happen, allowing sin to happen. So as parents, we don't need to allow things to happen. We can fight for our kids. We can fashion a whip and drive out the things that could hurt them, that could damage them. So Jesus wasn't doing that, I really want you guys to like me. I want to be the cool Jesus. He was doing that I have clear expectations, and that's not being followed. So I'm going to fight to protect you because I love you enough. So the whole thing, the millstone hung around his neck. So Jesus is if someone causes kids to sin, they should be a millstone is those giant stones that grinds grain into flour. So that would be hung around somebody's neck, which I think would already be choking, gagging, awful. I think that already in and of itself be uncomfortable. But then thrown into the water, so then they'd be dragged down by their head, drowning. That's pretty severe. That's not he's not even saying he should be killed immediately. No, that's a slow, yucky, awful, violent death. So that Jesus is taking that stance against people who are going to hurt children. If we're to be like Christ, we need to fight. We need to fight hard and not do the whole wanting to be the cool parent. Jesus never tried to be the cool savior. He just went for it. My dad would say, too, a lot growing up that sometimes I needed to be saved from myself and that was his job, or my mom would agree. My dad was just more vocal. So if I keep saying my dad, my mom did all of these things as well. He was just more the vocal one about it. So sometimes he's like, you know what, you're acting a fool, and you need me to kind of help you out. So my final point, sorry if I'm just rambling, we will have time for discussion after. But my final point is to treasure their spirit. And this idea, I set my alarm so it would go off when I was at the 10-minute mark. So Let me pause my Florence and the machine. There we go. So to treasure their spirit. So this is my a little bit, so I'm not having like all this, we're at war! Okay, now go have some bagels. Like, so I want to talk about treasuring their spirit. This necklace that I wear, my dad gave it to me when I turned 13, on my 13th birthday. This is a purity necklace. I'm glad he didn't give me a ring, because that would have like messed up my game now that I'm a single adult and going to the bar with an engagement ring on would be confusing. But this is a purity necklace. He gave it to me when I turned 13, and I've worn it every day since I was 13. And I took it off for a few soccer games if the refs were strict. But if you look up any pictures of me, if you see any pictures of me ever, I have this on. This is something I always wear. I wear it to formal events, not events. I sleep in it, shower in it, everything. I just always wear it. My sister always wore hers, and when she got married, she gave it to her husband. And they have a picture of them in their room, and she has like the necklace on it. So purity was a definite expectation in my family. When I turned 13, the year that I turned 13, my dad started taking me out on dates. Once a month, every month on the 15th. So, because my birthday was on the 15th. So every month on the 15th, we'd go out on a date. And I would usually have a say in what we were doing, but we would do like dinner and a movie, or mini golfing, or just dinner. And that was just my dad and my time. We didn't have like a formal, okay, Diana, now we're going to talk about sex. It wasn't like that. There was no formal plan to it. It was literally just me having a date with my dad and hanging out with my dad. And it was really good. And there was an element of, like, he let me know, like, this is how guys are supposed to treat you. Like, this is the thing. And I think this is definitely something that could be done with boys as well. Like, either dads taking their boys out, or moms taking their boys out, or whatever. Or moms taking their daughters out on dates, too. Like, I think these are all important things. But I really loved that time with my dad. So it was just me and him, no phones, there was nothing, no distraction. It was just us hanging out. And so this idea of what being valued and treated well looks like. And if a guy isn't treating you that way, then you don't need to be with that guy. He's not worth your time. So like I said earlier, we didn't talk a lot about sex in my family. We just talked. We did have dinner together every night. So that if that meant with sports that we were having dinner at 7 o'clock at night, we had dinner at 7 o'clock at night. Like we all sat together and we all ate. We also had dessert every night. And the reason I say that is because like you weren't allowed to get up until everybody was done. And when there's dessert, there's more motivation to stay, I think. So it was never, like we weren't allowed to be excused until everybody was finished eating, and my mom ate so slow. So we would only, but she cooked it. So it was like, okay, you cooked it, we'll sit. But so I even remember like being too old to be sitting on my dad's lap, but I would still get up after dinner and sit on his lap while we were finishing up dinner. So, I mean, I wouldn't do it now. I'd probably like snap his legs. But it would be like, so I'd be like 13, 14, like, Dad, remember when I sit on your lap? And I'd get up and sit on his lap and just like talk and be a part of the table, be a part of the conversation. So usually dinners were about like an hour, hour and a half. Then usually Seinfeld would come on at 7, so I'd sit and play rummy with my dad and watch Seinfeld, and then I'd go up and do homework. So there was this rhythm in our family of we spend time together. And they were really special times. Like it was really, so I would come home from school, and I needed alone time because I'm an extrovert, so I need time alone to kind of decompress. So it wasn't like I'd walk in the house after school and how was your day? It wasn't a whole lot of talking. I would just go into the basement and usually be painting or drawing or doing some kind of art thing downstairs, watching like after school shows or Oprah when I got older. Like just watching. And then time for dinner, I'd come back upstairs and we'd have dinner, and then I'd be with everybody and talking and fine. So we weren't like all up in each other's space all the time. There was definite freedom to kind of be a part and do our things. And then definitely when sports were happening, like we were able to come home, get a shower, and then come down for dinner. But dinner as a family, I can't stress it enough to parents, like, yes, do it. It's worth it. It is worth it. Because that's just when we talked. That was just when we got to be and got to enjoy each other. And I got to know my parents, too. Like, it wasn't just interrogation time. It was just talking and hearing funny stories and hearing about what it was like when my dad grew up, when my mom grew up, and all that kind of stuff. My parents did give me one of those awkward, embarrassing encyclopedias about your body, like the ever-changing, ever-growing you, or what, one of those like bookstore encyclopedia books about sex and changing body. They did give me one of those. I was grateful for it though. I was mortified about it, so I like buried it under all my stuff. But there would be a lot of times where like I'd kind of be like, and I'd pull it out and I'd like look through it and be like, oh, okay, I don't need to, and then put that away. So it was something that my parents were controlling where I was getting my information from. So it wasn't a Christian book. It wasn't like some famous, Jesus didn't write it. So, but it was still just helpful to have. So if you're kind of like, maybe think of going that direction, so your kid can just kind of have something and feel a little bit in control, and not totally like, I have to talk to my parents about everything, or if I have to Google it, or if they get embarrassed and they Google it, then they're getting way too much information. So they got me one of those like teenage growing up sex encyclopedias, for lack of a better term. I don't know what to call it, but it was like A to Z, your body, or something like that. So it was mortifying to own it, but I was grateful that I had it, because it was one of those like, okay, I just have a quick question. I just want to know what something is. Okay, cool. And in my mind, now I'm as an adult looking back, I was like, well, that was my parents kind of controlling the information I was getting without having it to always be a conversation, without always having to be like, well, hair growth, so it was just a helpful, like, okay. And sometimes I would still even bring it up later. So I looked in that book and this, so if you're talking with your kids and you're starting to set that culture, then cool. And if you don't have that culture and you want to start that culture, awesome. You can just tell your kids, hey, we're going to start doing this, and it's going to be awkward at first. Get over it. I'm your parent. It's going to be awkward. It's fine. Like, that's a good thing. Also, as far as like conversations and stuff, I always think of fire drills at school. And if you've ever done fire drills, do you take them seriously? Like, you follow all the directions, right? But I'm usually like playing on my phone, or they're stupid, because we do them so often, right? Like, they're so often, they're just kind of old hat. So what I would encourage you to do, as far as like talking about sex and purity with your kids, run fire drills with each other. Talk with your spouse or talk with a friend. Like, okay, we're going to practice. Throw a question at me, and we're just going to practice this. We're going to practice talking about whatever. And you could even just try to trip each other up and be obnoxious and be like, okay, I'm going to mention this and see how you respond. But conversations you could do as a fire drill. You could do, let's just practice. Like, so just in case this happens, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, and thinking that your child has just sold themselves into sex trade and they're going to be a stripper when they grow up and all that. So that you're kind of prepared, so that it's not as much of a, oh gosh, like we'll do that as teachers sometimes on our prep. I'll be like, I'll ask some goofy question to my coworker just to see how she handles it. Or I'll be like, oh, my one kid said this today, what would you have said? And we kind of bounce that stuff off each other, so it's not as scary when it happens. So when it does happen, oh, I've prepared for this, I've practiced this, or oh, what my spouse asked me is way crazier than what you just asked me, so we're good, like we're okay. This is, whew, God, you didn't go that route with it. And I talk too about, with like parents when I'm talking with them, it's just this idea of you don't have to give them the entire definition of something or the entire story of something when they first ask it. Like my sister's son is 5, and so he's starting to ask where babies come from and all of that kind of stuff. But she's not telling him she'll say, well, babies come from mommy's belly. Okay. That's it. He's not asking for the full sex talk. He's not asking for every minute detail. So like you can give definition as much as it's appropriate. So what is this? What's blowjob? Well, it's something with oral sex. Oh, okay, done. Okay, good. Glad we had that talk. Good talk. Like it doesn't have to. Every conversation doesn't have to be a, oh gosh, all right, let me tell you the whole story. So I would just encourage you to be talking with your kids and to really interact with them. So my verse for this would be Isaiah 62:4. It's actually my favorite Bible verse. It's no longer will they call you deserted. You're not alone. Your kids aren't alone. They're not deserted. Because we always have God if we don't have humans right with us. Or name your land desolate, but you will be called Hephzibah, which means my delight is in you. You are the protected one. and your land Beulah, which means married. For the Lord will take delight in you, and your land will be married. So this idea of our kids and us as parents, we're not deserted and we're not desolate. We have a God who's with us. And that our name is now, my delight is in you, and you are the protected one. So as we're moving forward and really trying to work with our kids and all kinds of just, in a world that's so in your face, and so, that's why I purposely did introduce what I was talking about, kind of like why did she say that? Ugh. That's the world we live in, and that's very much a true thing. But we're not alone, and we have a God who delights in us and who is with us, and that purity is definitely something to value and to treasure. And even for me growing up, there have been times, even as I was in my 20s and things, where purity was not something I wanted to pursue. And I was like, this is a stupid choice. This is annoying. I got dumped because of it. I've been cheated on because of it with the excuse of, well, we weren't having sex, so I didn't think you'd care. Well, that didn't feel good. So there was a lot of times where I didn't want to pursue that life. So that safety net was running really thin for me. My own decision was running really thin. But when that safety net was running really thin, I remembered the safety net of my family, and that the expectation was that I would save myself for marriage. So the thought of disappointing my parents and going against what I was brought up in and going against what was taught in my home, that became a safety net to my 27, 26-year-old self. So if the expectation isn't, kids will be kids, or as long as you're doing it under my roof, or all that kind of stuff, as long as the expectations are clear, it kind of does become, like, I know I'm an adult, so I'm talking about, but it carried me through. So the purity talks and the things that we discuss as a family, and this necklace and all of that, it became like a second safety net when my own reserve or my own desire to follow God in purity wore thin. Sometimes you need a backup, and sometimes that desire to follow God is not the ultimate. Sometimes the fear of disappointing your dad can sometimes feel like a bigger deal. So that was a really helpful thing, and that's what's kept me on this path and kept me on this life decision kind of thing. So I would encourage you with your kids to make it a clear expectation, like, this is the expectation of our house. This is the culture of our family. I wasn't taught that people who aren't are bad. Like, that's not a deal breaker for me when I date people. Like, it's not like, oh gosh, no, you're not. No, that was what I was brought up in, so it's different. But yeah, so this idea of, if that's the expectation of your home, to really stick with that and to really encourage your kids in that. And that can be something like that I'm grateful for, that as I carry into my adult life, that I have. It's tricky, yeah, it's different. It's a different world, it's a different everything, but it's almost like you're giving your kids double that safety net. So when their own desires start to wear thin, or their own, like, okay, I really do want to live this life, but it'd be easier to do this, or, it'd be easier to go with the culture, then you have that. But my parents are expecting this of me, and my parents have loved me, and my parents have done so much for me. So that's almost like a second kind of undergirding of that. When God's not feeling as real, you always feel real, because you're the human in their life. And sometimes it's hard to feel as committed to someone you can't see. You're someone they can see. So you have a really awesome role in this. And so I would just encourage you, like, in this whole purity process and teaching your kids and walking with your kids, is to just really talk with them. And it's not so much about purity, it's much more just about being in their life and really a part of what's going on, because stuff will just come up. And when it does, dig in your heels and don't be afraid, and fight. So God is good, and your kids are awesome because you're their parents, and you're doing a great job. You are. So, and know that you have tons of allies at our church and teachers and whoever that want to help you out and want to be a part of what's going on and all of that. So I think that is technically the end of our time, but if you want to talk or have any questions or anything, we can chit-chat some more. So, but thank you for coming. Sorry if I've been too, like, oh my God. I hope not, but you all kind of have, like, a sad face. I analyzed my classes by the facial expressions. I'm like, oh gosh, everybody looks like that's this, like, defeated, awful look on their face.